As you've probably heard by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code The Athletic, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code The Athletic. Make your first deposit of at least $10. Place your first bet on any game and claim your voucher for a 1-year subscription to The Athletic. See BetMGM.com for terms. U.S. promotional offers not available in D.C., Mississippi, New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona. 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan. 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code The Athletic, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager.
Poker ASMR. Almost as much as I love playing poker, I love the sounds of poker. The chips, the cards, the hands. And of course, the WSOP app sounds. If you love poker, play poker.
Download the WSOP free-to-play app and hear for yourself.
We'll get back to the pod in a moment, but first I have to tell you all about this game-changing product I use before a night out with drinks. It's called ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol. Pre-Alcohol is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly and you'll feel your best tomorrow. I won't lie, I was a bit on the fence about ZBiotics initially, but I gave it a shot and I was impressed with the results. Vacations, weddings, birthdays and reunions, there's so much going on. Get the most out of your summer plans by stocking up on pre-alcohol now. Go to zbiotics.com/race to get 15% off your first order when you use RACE at checkout. Pre-alcohol is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/race and use the code RACE at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, ZBiotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times.
The Athletic.
On the Race MotoGP podcast, we spend a lot of time these days talking about Ducati riders, talking about the championship rivals, and then kind of flipping to people being kicked out of MotoGP and kind of middle-of-the-grid rider market shenanigans. We don't talk a lot at the moment about people who are doing really, really well under the radar. And by under the radar in 2024, I kind of mean not on a Ducati, and particularly not on a Ducati GP24. So for this week's edition of the Race MotoGP podcast, we're going to do something quite unusually happy for us. But, you know, we like the odd negative news story, but we're going to delve into some riders who deserve celebrating, who might not be getting the acclaim they deserve this year because they're not on the bikes that are going to be winning races. I'm Matt Beer, and I've tasked my regular friends on this podcast, Val Khorounzhiy and Simon Patterson, with sending me lists of the riders they rank as the top 6 not on Ducatis this season. As you know, regular listeners, these two disagree over a fair amount of things. So, Simon, who do you think Val might have put in a top 6 who would not be on your list?
Ooh, good question. It's Val, so I'm going to go with like Alex Rins, Luca Marini, Fermin Aldeguer.
He's on a Ducati in spirit.
I think maybe one of the Japanese riders will have one of the Japanese bike riders will have made it onto Val's list that hasn't made it onto my list, I think, because obviously the kind of straightforward answer to this question is KTM and Aprilia riders, isn't it? But there's more to it than that. So I think maybe I've been a bit too other European manufacturers who aren't Ducati heavy, and Val's went the other way and given Japan a bit more love.
So flip that. Val, who do you think is on Simon's list who has not made the cut for you?
I feel like I've kind of given it away to him.
Go on, Val.
Raul Fernandez. Yeah, that was going to be my guess even before Simon's monologue about including too many KTMs on Aprili's, and it is especially my guess now.
Interesting. Well, let's start. So I kind of combined the scores to work out a little ranking here, as you'd expect. And in sixth place, you both had the same rider, and it's someone on a Japanese machine. Johan Zarco, who is he actually top Honda in the points? I feel like he definitely should be.
No, weirdly, I think it's still Mir.
No, it's Zarco now by 1 point.
By 1 point, yeah. But on a measly 14 points and only 18th in the World Championship, which is behind an awful lot of other people who are not on Ducati. So, Simon, I'll let you start on this one. What has Zarco been doing this year on that Honda that has so impressed you?
He's just immediately jumped on the bike and taken no time at all to adapt to it and been top Honda or fighting for top Honda. I thought there would be a bit more of a transition process for him. I think everyone did, because transition processes are pretty normal now in MotoGP, given how different every bike feels. I think the fact that he's managed to compress that into preseason testing and started the year basically right there with Joan Mir is pretty impressive. And then on top of that, he's, I've talked about this quite a bit in the rider ratings, I think. He's done this thing really well where Luca Marini is so slow that he's at the back, but he's safe. Joan Mir is trying to be so fast that he is permanently at risk of a crash. And Zarco's kind of the Honda rider who's picked the balance well, and who just seems to be fast enough to not fall off, but then, kind of benefits whenever Joan Mir does fall off and Zarco gets the points that Mir would have scored. He's struck a really good balance this year in the bike, and he's taken no time at all to adapt to it. That's what's impressed me.
Yeah, I'd say it's not been a particularly, I would say, rosy season still for Zarco. I think there are shortcomings. He would be higher than sixth in my entry here if it was like totally 100% convincing, but I do think he deserves a lot of credit for immediately emerging as Honda's top qualifier by a considerable margin. I mean, it's been close weekend to weekend, but you look at the overview of the season, and quick and dirty maths in my head, I think there's been 2 rounds out of 11 where the top Honda qualifier has been somebody other than Johan Zarco. I think 1 round it was Mir, 1 round it was Nakagami. And okay, we're not talking about vintage qualifying superstars in Joan Mir or, well, Nakagami maybe sometimes. And Luca Marini obviously has had a very long adaptation process, so he wasn't really in the same time code to begin with. So Zarco's gotten... He
is a guy who had 2 pole positions earlier in his career as well. He struggled with the Honda, but he's a decent qualifier. So it's a good, solid roster of MotoGP riders, and Zarco, while needing to adapt to a new bike, has basically started dominating them over 1 lap, which I think deserves a lot of credit, especially considering, as we say so often on this podcast, he was Ducati's worst qualifier by I think a decent margin last season, or at least that's how it felt. He's been there or thereabout in the races. I still think Mir has had the edge over longer run race performance when you look at like normal races both had, because sometimes stuff just breaks, or they get stuck behind somebody, or they run a slightly weird strategy in terms of pushing and run out of tire or run out of energy. So they've been slightly difficult to compare, also because they're just not running the same specs right now. So we know, for instance, in Austria that 3 of the Hondas I think had 1 engine spec, and Zarco's still pushing on with the spec he likes, which I think is punchier on the straight, but a bit more of a handful. And there doesn't appear to be total agreement within the Honda ranks on which direction they're pursuing in terms of upgrades. And I think Zarco is maybe slightly part of that discord, but he's been close enough in races to where it's never a surprise when he finishes as top Honda. So that's, I think it would be weird not to pick any of them in a 6. And I think for me, Zarco is the one who, given the recent switch, he's made the most impression. I would say most of an impression. You mentioned obviously that he was the worst Ducati qualifier. That's a reminder that he is the man who walked away from a Ducati GP24, the bike that you cannot get off the podium at the moment. With everything that's played out since then in rider market terms, you know, you wonder if would he be the man filling that final space in the Ducati lineup that is a lot of people are leaving Ducati this year. Basically, would that have made Ducati even more keen to keep hold of Zarco in its ranks? Basically, how is Zarco feeling about? I know he went to Honda for a project for a very specific reason, but with the way things have turned out since, with the 2024 Ducati being so good, plus the wider rider exodus, do you get any inkling that he feels he might have jumped too soon?
We've heard riders talk about this before, about the stress and the uncertainty and the pain that comes from being a MotoGP in a 1-year deal. And on never knowing what the future is going to bring and never knowing what might happen and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that, Zarco is probably fairly confident that he's made the right move to get that 2-year deal, to be at Honda longer term, to not have to have spent... he could have spent the first 6 months of this season worrying about what happens if Firmin Aldeguer finally wins 3 races in a row and Ducati decide he is as good as we thought he was at the end of last year and he's getting a Pramac bike for next season. Sorry, Johan. Off to find something else. There's so many variables, and I think that, this isn't any MotoGP rider we're talking about either. It's our resident kind of philosopher who I think will have looked at all the considerations here, will have looked at all the way that things might have gone wrong for him in this situation, will be sitting quite comfortable in his 2-year deal, happy that he's probably got a bit of a long-term future at Honda thanks to the work that he's doing right now.
I found Zarco's emotions really hard to get a beat on during his Honda time so far. And, this is a guy who doesn't hide much, but he's always, he, as Simon says, there's always this sort of philosophizing going on with him, and no real, we haven't seen him massively upset this season, or I would say massively happy necessarily. We've seen him just be...
I will say that actually Austria is the happiest that I've seen him in a very long time. It's not like Johan to be kind of cracking jokes in his media debriefs and stuff like that, but all the way through Austria, through a pretty decent weekend, he was really, really happy and content guy.
On a different spec to the other Hondas, which I don't quite like the implication of for the wider Honda project, but let's see how that works out. I think, Matt, to your question, for me the difference is, Phillip Island 2023, right? Phillip Island 2023 plays out differently, and then we're looking at this like, ooh, yeah, like you've traded away a fantastic chance to finally win. Like this 1 year, obviously, how good GP24 is. I think he was probably going to get it done in one weekend, or at least the chances will have been pretty good. But, the win's there. The title isn't coming, I think. It's fair to say that. I don't think he'll particularly object that he's not really in MotoGP right now to win a championship. All of them could if the stars aligned, but that's not really the primary objective here.
Yeah, Zarco is a bright guy who will be aware that he is 34 years old. He'll be aware of his career achievements so far. The way you put it there makes it come across like he is quite rightly going, if I win 1 Grand Prix or 3 Grand Prix, is it actually that different? Yeah. I'm a MotoGP winner. I enjoy being in MotoGP. I'll go and earn a bit more and do this with a bit of career security.
Don't forget that. Don't forget the bank balance. It's not just career security. We know that, we know, I've not seen the contract, but I think it is common knowledge in the paddock that Honda has ponied up for his services.
Put it this way, after living his whole career in France, whenever he signed his Honda contract, he immediately moved to the tax haven of Andorra. Yeah. So read into that what you will.
Yeah, subtle.
So that probably that gif of Woody Harrelson wiping his tears away with money that goes around on Twitter quite often.
The Luca Marini approach.
Well, also the Fabio. We'll spoilers. We'll get to the other guy, but it's a bit of that, and just generally, I think he's fine with it. I think he is the kind of person who will feel a lot of pride if Honda does right the ship with his input. And also there was a suggestion from him that it's sort of a way to put the KTM situation a bit right, because obviously KTM he walked away from immediately. It basically checked out at first contact and was gone after half a season. So this is sort of a way to show the side of Johan Zarco who doesn't run from a fight with a bad bike, and an older, wiser, maybe more of a team player, Johan Zarco. The season so far, in that regard, seems to be going quite well. Like there's no indication that LCR has been unhappy with him. No indication that he's been a bad presence. He's won the Suzuka 8 Hours with Honda. I think that's very important to mention. That's at Ducati that will have been unavailable this year. It might be available in the future, but it would not have been available this year. And he's won it. And he's played a big part in winning it. So it's working out. It's all right. It's obviously championship position. That'll sting, but it's offset for me.
Yeah, the older, wiser thing is spectacular for a rider who, it was within the same 11 months covered quitting KTM in the way he did after the lack of success, ending up on the vintage Ducati a few days after going, no way will I ever ride for a Vintia, and then the whole Red Bull Ring 2020 shunt thing and all the rage against him in the paddock, and that all seems so far away now.
And don't forget, that stint also included, 3 races on the LCR Honda, I think, as a potential audition to replace the retiring Jorge Lorenzo before Alex Marquez got the nod instead. There's so much that happened to Johan Zarco in that stretch. Probably some stability is nice compared to that.
Yeah, of all the people who are going to leave MotoGP eventually having not won titles, he will have one of the best autobiographies to write at the end of it with the way things have gone for him. Let's move away from Japanese bikes into a tie for 4th place between 2 riders on European kit. Simon put Brad Binder 4th and Aleix Espargaro 5th. Val did them the other way around, so they are tied for joint 40-50. Let's go. Who's actually on top in the championship? I'll make that my tiebreaker. I'll use the real points.
That'll be Binder.
Binder, yeah, by 2 places and 15 points. So let's talk about Brad first. Now, at the start of the season, his appearances on this podcast were mostly in the context of him being obliterated by Pedro Acosta and us going, oh, hang on, was Binder not actually good after all? Has the KTM been amazing for all these years and even Binder's been wasting it? Val was the Binder defender / advocate a little bit more then, were you? I'm just assuming Val will be said the nice things because that's your role in this podcast. Yeah.
Unless you're Yamaha.
Absolutely. That may appear later. Who knows? Let's go to Simon first on this. How do you rate Binder at this point in the season? Obviously, you put him 4th. You put him higher of the 2 of you. Has he redeemed himself after giving fans, pundits, KTM the first reason to question him properly in a little while?
Yes and no. He's kind of pulled things together and slotted into that Brad Binder place that we expect at this point in the season, where he's kind of consistently running P6 now. But he's still only 3 points ahead in the championship from Acosta. He's still not had an amazing year. And I'm still not convinced that he's running P6 because that's the level of the bike, and not because that's the level of Binder. Because we've seen Acosta still able to kind of work a little bit more magic in a weekend and, achieve a little bit more now and then. So I'm not convinced. I remain a little bit skeptical, but in saying that, he's still by far the second best KTM, like by far, and is still probably the, in contention, as we'll see, the 3rd or 4th best European rider going through this list. I don't know. It's hard to gauge Binder's season for me, considering the up and down that we're seeing, considering where the various levels are right now of this bike, that always seems to be an enigma, that seems to every season go through this spell of, oh, it's good, oh, it's not, oh, it's good, oh, it's not, who knows what it is. Putting a pin in that's quite difficult at the minute, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, the KTM, when the KTM was at its best, it felt like Binder, aside from Qatar, was at his worst. And whether that's the impact of Acosta's arrival or just, natural fluctuations of form or whatever, it could be just random variance. We're not talking about big sample sizes here. But I think to me, it looks undeniable that KTM has declined. Whether that decline is on the KTM side or on the side of, the GB24, sorting out vibrations and whatever else was troubling it and just disappearing into the distance. That's probably part of it. I'd imagine that's most of it. But, it doesn't help you assess Binder because, suddenly, at the start of the season, somebody could fight the GP24s, and Pedro Acosta was doing that. Now none of the KTMs can do it, and Binder is sort of where he was, but he's improved relative to Acosta and even a bit Miller probably, although Miller has also, it's complicated. It's a whole, you have to make certain, you have to account for a lot of moving pieces and try to estimate which ones have actually moved or which ones have only moved by proxy. It's the usual thing. And with Binder this year, it's, I think, harder than with most. So, I might be wrong. We all might be wrong, as always with everything, but particularly here. But yeah, I think he's
particularly with KTM.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
I think of all the manufacturers on the grid, KTM's the one where for years we've been going, this is so up and down. What is causing it? And Binder had felt like the touchstone, the bit where you go, okay, it's this. It's probably this good. It's probably not quite as good as he's making it look, but at least you've got a consistent level of this is giving some Ducatis some hassle. You can. Well, not these won a lot of, not that that bike has actually won a lot of Grand Prix, but it's been in contention for doing so. But yeah, you talk about him being clearly second best KTM this year. I mean, everyone who is lower than that has been sacked, so definitely. But now this is asking a big hypothetical even by our standards, because the adaptation process will feed into this so much. But taking that aside as far as you can, do you see him being second best KTM rider next year when Enea Bastianini and Maverick Vinales turn up? Simon nodded straight away.
I see him being second best KTM rider next year to Pedro Acosta for sure. I think Maverick is going to take, we talked about, the transition process earlier with Zarco. Maverick Vinales has shown that he is not very rapid at that sometimes. I think it's going to take 6 months maybe for Vinales to find his comfort zone. Bastianini is a bit more of an unknown. But I think this Ducati is probably so different from, or the KTM is so different from the bikes that they're riding from, the Ducati and the Aprilia, that it's going to take a bit of time to transition. So I can see Binder having enough of a points margin built up at that point to probably still end the season ahead of them. Plus they're on satellite spec machinery. KTM do this thing where they throw a lot of new parts to the bike, but the new parts always arrive to the factory first, even if the satellite team does get them eventually. Yeah, I think he's got enough of an advantage next year to maintain his position, but I absolutely think he will be P2 and not P1.
Yeah. I along similar lines, I think I just wouldn't be surprised if he maintained that sort of position next year, being second while the guys adapt. But I also think we're going to see a lot of movement in that pecking order within KTM. And I think a fair bit of that movement is going to be conditioned potentially by, I think still, and this has retreated a bit into the background because KTM has bigger issues to worry about, but still Binder's qualifying gives me a lot of pause as the big final missing piece of the puzzle. And, you can't in the modern MotoGP formula overcome that consistently. And, I think Acosta will blossom into a better qualifier. I think Vinales is going to magic a qualifying lap once every 3 rounds. It's complicated. It's so complicated to even offer any sort of assessment of that I could be happy with. Like we have to see Enea and Maverick are the bigger question marks there than actually Binder, who increasingly I think we feel that what you see is what you get, for better, certainly a lot, but also in some ways for worse. You could fairly ask whether he has kicked on, but then again, the baseline level was pretty high, so you're not going to get every rider making that step into true elite, which 12 months ago we believed he was, and now we're not so sure. It's complicated. It's really, really hard.
Let's go to the other part of our tie for fourth then, Espargaro. He's on his way out of MotoGP. Is his performance this season evidence that he might be, if taking away the circumstances, he's obviously not going too soon in terms of where the rider market's moving. It's quite a sensible move. But on performance this year, Val, could he go on and on from here still, do you reckon?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm certain. He's been good. His dips aren't as bad as Maverick Vinales' dips, which, you could say that for a lot of riders, I would say. The way Aleix Espargaro loses points is by crashing. The way Maverick Vinales loses points is by, other things.
Engaging reverse gear and the lights go out.
Yeah,
just going to a different circuit for the weekend after qualifying third.
That's basically. I was going to say that, but I couldn't figure out a diplomatic, nice way of putting all that together.
I'm pretty sure Maverick doesn't listen to the podcast, Val. You can be less than diplomatic.
Imagine if he did, though. I mean, I would be his best friend. Anyway.
You'll be everyone's best friend. Except Yamaha.
Lynn Jarvis, yeah. I think, Aleix, I think his peaks have still been just super, super impressive to me. And, part of that at this point, we have to wonder whether Aprilia equipment is just boosting one rider and then the other and then one and then the other in runs, and whatever in that equipment is doing that, whether it's wear and tear, whether it's the peculiarities of the setup, clearly. Because, as Miguel Oliveira has spoken all season, it's such a tricky bike, clearly, to get into the right window. But certainly, at the very least, I think at no point this season has Aleix looked like a rider who you would bin off. For me, like he has looked like a rider you can upgrade on, but he has not looked like a rider who does not belong in MotoGP. So as Paul put it, his brother Paul put it in Austria, Paul said he is really jealous of Aleix being able to walk away while still clearly in the game, still clearly close thereabout with his best. And, that's pretty cool. I think that's nice for him. And I think this season reflects that he's still very potent.
Yeah, Simon, you've always... I don't think it's unfair to say you've always been fond of Espargaro. You recognise his ups and downs, but you appreciate his outspokenness. Is MotoGP missing out by him leaving when he's leaving, or are we at the right point in the storyline?
No, there's going to be a hole next year for people who are willing to speak out about safety issues and really risk pissing off the organisers. I think that's... There's a real, I can't see anyone who's going to be ready to step up and fill that position, and I think that's where he's probably going to be missed more than anything else. He's the guy that whenever someone does something dangerous, you go to Aleix and say, Aleix, tell me what you think about this, and he'll have an answer. And it's often a good way for us as journalists to frame it, because I think he thinks in quite a sensible way in that regard. He sometimes doesn't think like a motorbike racer in that regard, which is a good thing. I think it's good to have that voice. So he'll be missed from that perspective. Yeah. I think Aprilia will miss him in terms of having a bit of a team leader figure in the team, in the squad, in the garage. I don't think Jorge Martin is the guy to be that, and I don't think Jorge Martin will allow Marco Bezzecchi the opportunity to take that role either. I think that that garage is going to be a lot more. It's going to be a cooler place next year than it has been this year. There's not going to be the same camaraderie in it between those two sides of the camp, given how close they are. They'll miss him next year. The championship will miss him as well. And it's a funny one where his results. There are people who have retained a seat for next year who inarguably deserve the seat less than Aleix, but are getting to keep their seat partly because Aleix is walking away.
We love talking stats here at The Athletic. Here's one that's super simple to remember. Discover automatically doubles the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cash Back Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back to $300. That's right. You could put it towards some memorabilia you've had your eye on, or treat yourself to a premium sports network. You earn, and Discover doubles. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
Time now to tell you about the sponsor of this episode, Grammarly. Do you struggle with when to use fewer instead of less? Do you find yourself writing important emails which, when you look back on them, take far too long to get to the point? Are you guilty of exclamation marks and too much jargon? Well, Grammarly is an AI writing partner that helps you find the words you need and the right text for your context. It learns your personal style and your brand or company style to give you personalised suggestions based on what you're writing and who's going to read it. Grammarly works across all the apps and sites you use, like Word, Google Docs, Pages, Slack, and more, so there's no need to copy and paste. Grammarly works where you work. Smart features like tone suggestions help you navigate even the most difficult work conversations. And what's more, data privacy and security are woven into the foundations of Grammarly. It's the gold standard of responsible AI, with 15 years of best-in-class communication, trusted by tens of millions of professionals and IT departments. So get AI writing support that works where you work. Download Grammarly for free at grammarly.com/podcast. That's GRAMMARLY.com/podcast. Grammarly. Easier said, done.
On to the top three, and I'm sad to say this also starts with more diplomatic agreement. Simon put Fabio Quartararo third, Maverick Vinales second. Val put them the same two riders other way round, so we are equal on that front. I'm going to go to... I'm not going to go championship order first. I'm going to go most intriguing one first, because I think the Vinales case is quite clear to make given how high his peaks have been. But Fabio Quartararo, second best non-Ducati rider in Val's eyes, third for Simon. Now, I know the listeners to this podcast are among the most hardcore MotoGP fans, so I've got no doubt a lot of people in this podcast will be well aware of what Fabio Quartararo is doing. But if you're talking to your less hardcore friends about MotoGP, someone who kind of pops in from F1 occasionally, they would be hard-pressed to notice Quartararo has been on the grid for a lot of this season. So, Val, you put Quartararo second. You're not that fond of the progress his team's making, but in your eyes, clearly he is riding as well as ever, better than ever?
I mean, I don't know if as well as ever better. It's impossible to compare for the reasons of the M1 being not good. And, you know, we should not, you know, this is a rider ranking. This is an attempt to put him in order in our perceptions. I try to go to considerable pains not to penalize riders for the level of their machinery. I mean, Quartararo can only be judged on the basis of what I think that Yamaha could do with another rider. And I don't think it could do much more. In fact, I would be not totally surprised if the answer is actually none of the guys on the grid could do more with this than what he's doing. There's a big part of me that's still not convinced that it's a better bike than the Honda. And it's a bike that has fewer data points to lean off of per weekend. I mean, Quartararo has only had Rins's data, and Rins has been struggling with fitness for half a season and still learning a different bike to the bikes he's been riding before in the other half. Quartararo is beating him in qualifying, and he's pretty consistently obliterating him in races. Austria actually being a rare counterexample, but I think in most sessions you look and Quartararo is a considerable step ahead, and Alex Rins is, you know, it's no pushover, so I think that's all we can judge him on. You know, he hasn't been making bad mistakes. He's been putting the bike as close to Q2 as it deserves to be. He's been scoring points when points are available. I mean, yeah, there's been a mistake or two there, and I'm sure motivation's close to impossible to keep high right now in terms of getting actual results on track. What is an 11th place for Fabio Quartararo? What is a 12th place? Nothing. Worth nothing at all. But, you know, he's been doing it. He's been, you know, it's his efforts that will ensure Yamaha finishes like with twice the points of Honda this season with a bike that I don't think is twice as good.
I think it's, yeah, not twice as good, but it is better. And I think it's difficult to compare him to his teammate, because I think you have to kind of see Alex Rins in person to realize how broken the poor guy still is. Like, he can barely walk. The leg injuries to Mugello last year and all the crap that he's suffered since are still holding him back. They're still affecting him. So I think that it's difficult to measure, you know, the two of them against each other in that regards. Really looking forward to having 4 Yamahas next year just to balance out that a little bit and give us a bit more, you know, data points. But Quartararo, that doesn't take anything away from the fact that Quartararo is doing a great job. He's, you know, I am impressed more than anything else with his ability to cope with the obvious frustration that he must be suffering, because you can see it now. You know, watch qualifying, watch Q1 and qualifying. He goes out and does a time that is easily good enough to go to Q2 in the first run of every session, and then basically that's his ceiling and everyone else can go faster and he can't. So he's still got the ability to do those times. It's just that the bike won't let him go any further. And I think he's not worried to crash it, but he's just not a crasher. Remember like his rookie season in MotoGP, he got to the Sachsenring before he fell off for the first time. Like, he's not a crasher. It took a
very long time. Yeah.
If he were a crasher, if he were like a Joan Mir character who's a bit more predisposed to putting it on the line, I think we would regularly be seeing Fabio in Q2, but then also, failing to finish considerably more races as a result of that. So, he's another one that's probably struck the balance quite well this year between his own abilities, finishing races, and the level of the bike. I think he hasn't done anything that makes me think that, he's lost it or something, that he's not immediately going to be a championship contender once Yamaha fix the bike again. Because I think that, once that package inevitably gets better, he's going to like pick up where he left off in the middle of 2021 again.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, there's just no reason to think that Quartararo's worse right now than he was then. There's no real evidence for it. It could be true.
And I don't think anyone else has got better.
Yeah. And it could be true, but we don't know.
Bearing all that in mind, he obviously had opportunities earlier this year to take himself away from Yamaha. He's rightly very highly rated. Obviously, he was approached by Aprilia, but realistically, that can't have been the only. If he wanted to get out of Yamaha, there would be people who would sign him. I suspect the two of you might have slightly different views on whether he has done the right thing by getting some money to wipe his tears with, as you put it earlier. Has he made the right call, sticking around? Simon nods. Val sort of nods.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, the Yamaha's going to be better again. It's Yamaha. They're pumping more resources into that project than anyone else in MotoGP right now. They're headhunting more names than anyone else in MotoGP right now. I think that their biggest rival are, the cracks are already starting to show a little bit in the Ducati project. I think that, it's not going to last forever. Nothing, no run of dominance lasts forever in MotoGP. And he's going to be in a position where, be it next year or the year after, or be it 2027, he's going to be in a position where he's built himself a brand new bike that's built for him to go fast on again by people who finally understand what, you need to do with aerodynamics and everything these days in MotoGP. I think that, Yamaha have already shown that they're letting Fabio develop the bike to his style by the fact that they ignored all of their test riders' input and built a faster engine whenever everyone else said that it was a stupid thing to do, and that they've now had to reverse that decision once Fabio realized that was a bad thing to do. But it proves that they're following his lead. It proves that they're doing at least, what he tells them to do in some ways. So, I think he's on the right path. They're on the right path. It just needs a bit of time.
There's a non-zero chance for me that, given the way this regulations cycle is playing out, we have to be careful with that because things could change very, very quickly, and they do. I mean, look at Formula One's current season to see an example of that. But there's a very real possibility, and it's not unreasonable to look at any sort of rider market dilemma right now as being you get on a Ducati or it doesn't matter until 2027. So you get on a Ducati or you get paid. Quartararo was getting paid. I don't know, a Ducati maybe will have been available, but he was not going to get paid there. And whatever time he would have spent honing himself on a Ducati like that, we still are, for instance, sure that he's the most adaptable rider. The most adaptable rider doesn't struggle in Moto3 and Moto2, I suspect. So, not taking that risk in a career that's already, it could be better right now, but it's already so much better than it was looking, 6 years ago? I mean, I get that. It's difficult to be annoyed, but I want to be annoyed, if that makes sense. But I guess I'm not.
Thing is, if you're looking 6 years ago, if Quartararo was hanging on to a place in MotoGP with a satellite team at this point compared to where he was pre that more impressive Moto2 season and everything that followed, we'd be thinking that's a good return for your career, Fabio, given how things were looking for that spell.
Works Yamaha rider. Ooh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good work.
Tying him for second then in your list is Maverick Vinales, king of peaks. So incredible at Austin and has been at some other races as well. is the best way to summarise his season. But despite the fact the troughs have been as maverick as ever, Simon, you feel he's the second best rider not on a Ducati this year. What's your thinking?
He is the best rider not in a Ducati this year sometimes. And I think that's the main reason why he's PG in my list. Because whenever he's on form, he is by far the best rider on the grid. Not even against the Ducatis. He's, we saw that Austin weekend where he was just utterly dominant. And if only we could have more of those, he could be something completely different. But we've never had more of those in Fabio's or in Maverick's entire career, and therefore he's second in the list, not first in the list. There's so much potential. There always is, and he delivers it now and again, and he reminds us all that he's fantastic, and then it all just disappears and into the ether. And as Val said earlier, he just isn't there for some races. It's like he turns up to a different circuit. I would like to be in a position where he was a clear P1 in this, but we're not there yet. And I suspect we will never be there, because I think he's made some kind of concessions recently about the reason he's going to KTM is that he wants to be now the first person to win MotoGP races for 4 different manufacturers. And if you're going to KTM with the express purpose of trying to win races, it means you're never going to win a championship. But it's true though, isn't it? Like, he's not going to be a champion anymore. Like, that's, as the guy who was expected to be the next big thing a few years ago, it's not going to happen. It's done. Concentrate on winning races for KTM Maverick. That's a good place for you and your mad inconsistency.
Ultimately, Giacomo Agostini, Marc Marquez, Valentino Rossi, they all don't stand a chance in the GOAT debate against theoretical Maverick Vinales, the greatest rider of all time.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, he torched everyone at Kota. He's got that in his locker. Aprilia's increasingly just the vibe doesn't feel right for him. The place that team is in doesn't feel right for him. He isn't better than they are, but he is at a point in his career, unlike the recovery project, like reclamation project that he was a few years ago after the Yamaha disappointment. But he is weirdly in a place of his career right now where he kind of needs to try another Yamaha, another sort of super serious factory team, which Tech 3 maybe isn't quite, but, being KTM adjacent will be to some degree. Because this is a rider who gets unsettled very easily from his planned weekend, and Aprilia is not the place you go to get clean weekends. It's not the place you go to for all the pieces of bike to work the same way across, one session the other. It's not a place you go to where you're going to hop from one bike to the other and not notice the difference. Or at least that's my perception from the way he's been talking about it, but it's the general Aprilia stereotype. Maybe he comes to Tech 3 KTM and it's the exact same thing there, and then we know. But at the same time, we already kind of know. Look, I don't know. It's I've used the word "know" a lot. I don't understand what it means anymore. But I think that rambling is the exact right answer for Maverick Vinales, and not just me being unprofessional and bad.
There was a while when it felt like we were going to be talking about Maverick Vinales in the same breath as, say, a Jorge Lorenzo.
Definitely.
Whenever it looked like he was going to come in and win 2 or 3 championships, that amazing Yamaha pre-season where he just obliterated everyone in testing and then won like 3 of the first 4 races, and then just his head fell off. And then it looked for a while like we would never talk about Maverick Vinales at all post-retirement. And now we're kind of back to a place where, there's a very real possibility that in 10 years' time he's going to be mentioned in the same breath as people like Danny Pedrosa and Randy Mamola as being, the best nearlies ever, the guys who might not have won a championship but who still made a really significant mark on the championship. And that's not a terrible thing for someone that looked like they were set to disappear into, relative obscurity not that long ago.
Yeah.
And who still does disappear into relative obscurity on like a third of all Grand Prix race weekends.
Yeah, good description. I think Vinales and Pedrosa have gone about being nearly men in very different ways in terms of both seat hopping, race performances, and all sorts of things. But yeah, like you say, the peaks are not just good; they are incredible. It's just they happen maybe once a season and on several winter test days. But There we go. We know that him at KTM is one of the things I'm most intrigued about next season. But it's also sad that someone who I felt so excited about when they came into MotoGP, when they were on the way to MotoGP, if moving to KTM, if a big part of the motivation of that is to hit this statistic of winning on 4 different bikes, then his career ambition has turned into be the answer to a trivia quiz, and that's a shame.
And the problem is, if I go to a pub where we do trivia and I pitch that as one of the questions, I'm going to get kicked out. So that's unfortunate. I think
try it, because you are good at Viñales trivia, and that would be just a crowning moment of both your hobbies and your career.
It's like that would make me happier than anything. All right, that's a sad thing to say. so maybe let's not.
So we're down to just one rider in their top 6s, and after I said at the outset how much I was looking forward to all the disagreement that would come in this podcast when these two pitched lists against each other, I can sadly reveal that you've picked the exact same 6 riders, just with slightly different order in the middle. You've both put Pedro Acosta number 1 as best non-Ducati rider overall this season. Now, in the first couple of weeks of the season, there was an absolutely inarguable case for that. Like, he was going to beat a bunch of Ducatis to a race win anytime soon on an inferior bike, and at the age of 5-ish with 0 MotoGP experience. I am impressed that he holds up as top of your lists, and Simon, you can go first on this, even after fading a little recently. You know, we've mentioned him on some of the other podcasts answering Members Club questions, and we'll come back to the Members Club in a second because we've got another extra for you this week from in there. But I do get the feeling from the questions being sent in by listeners, and from what you see on social, there was a little bit of a, not loss of faith in Acosta, but wondering if we were all a little bit too excited to start with. But in your eyes, Simon, that's not faded. He's still number 1 in the non-Ducatis. Yeah.
I think he is still having a rookie season that is on par with Marc Marquez's rookie season in 2013, even though Marquez won the title, because MotoGP right now is not the same world as it was back then, and all things aren't created as equal as they were back then. But if Pedro Acosta had graduated this year to MotoGP on a factory GP 24, he'd be fighting for the title. I'm relatively sure of that, because I think he is that good. I think everything we've seen is indicative of the fact that he's just really, really talented. And, you know, we it's not a surprise, because we suspected it all the way through rising up the ranks, didn't we? He's always been really, really good in his 3 years in the junior class that gave him 2 titles. Like, I mean, come on, no one does that. And here we are. Ton of potential, doing a great job. The amount of kind of podium contention he spent this year in has been really, really impressive. The fact that he's, you know, still kind of battling at the front with people like Marc Marquez now and then, and maybe not winning, but certainly learning from it. Just everything about it is great rookie job, and cannot wait to see him in a factory bike next year with a year of experience, another year of winter testing under his belt. He's going to be top non-Ducati next year. I'm pretty sure of that.
For me, it's important to not penalize Acosta for starting off strong and dipping in results terms, and probably maybe in form terms, and form terms relative to the other KTMs. After all, those early races count the same amount of points as these most recent races. Maybe the most recent races tell us slightly more about what to expect in the next races. That's how linear time works, I guess. But those early races, they counted the same. And in fact, that he hit the ground running as well as he did is even more impressive in that regard. There were always going to be peaks and troughs in a rookie season, especially when you come in and immediately you're a top 5 MotoGP rider, and at that point, then things stop clicking. The bike isn't delivering what you want it to deliver. Not everybody's going to respond to that perfectly. Going by Austria, I suspect Acosta has not. Austria was not a good weekend, but coming into the season, again, remember we did the preseason predictions or whatever. I left him out of the top 10, I think, for the championship. I said he wouldn't win any races or anything. He's blown my expectations out of the water. If he was even at this point that he is right now, just regularly with Binder and Miller without skipping a beat, weekend to weekend variants, if he's already on their level, I can't reasonably ask for more. And I don't want to, in my personal ranking, penalize him for starting stronger than I expected and then maybe coming back towards more of a reasonable level rather than the sky-high nonsense of the start of 2024. So it's not even about like projecting him. It's not even about trying to gauge what he's going to do over the rest of the season, what he's going to do in 2025. I mean, as a rookie, he's been fantastic and making a concession for the fact he had not ridden a MotoGP bike in anger before this season. I think I can't see an argument for somebody else at number one at this point.
Yeah, and you've been... I like the fact you've been in agreement on that. I like the fact that an episode that I decided was going to be a bit of a good vibes episode. We weren't going to talk about people doing badly this week. We weren't going to talk about people losing their places. We were going to go for celebrating some stuff. Acosta is actually a really good news story for MotoGP, because at a time when actually one bike dominating to this extent is... It's good when there's a storyline, and Jorge Martin versus Pecco Bagnaia is a storyline. Pecco Bagnaia versus Marc Marquez next season will be a storyline, but somebody looking as good as Acosta not on that bike is exactly what MotoGP needs to avoid being nervous at this point over what the next couple of years till the rule change might look like. Lots more elsewhere on the race from us this week. We've launched our own MotoGP specific YouTube channel, the Race MotoGP. Search it on YouTube. Our first video on there is debating the fate of Jack Miller following the news that he's likely to get a MotoGP reprieve for next season. Have a watch. Leave feedback in the comments. Like it if you like it. Subscribe if you really like it. Tell your friends to do likewise, because we'll do more and more and more of these if the reception proves there's demand for it, and we really think it will. We're also, if you're in the members club, which you can join via the website at www.the-race.com/members-club, or search for the race on Patreon. We're doing a 7-day free trial on Patreon at the moment. We've got a MotoGP extra in there for you this week, which is us three ploughing through loads and loads of questions that you've asked us over the last few races on all kinds of tangents and intrigue, including kind of taking us to task for some of the things we said about Miguel Oliveira and his attitude, and also delving into the Ulster Grand Prix history. The range is superb there. And of course, we'll be back next week after Aragon. But before signing off from this one, I've got a quick, not single sentence challenge, but maybe semi-Larry prediction challenge for these two. Based on the top 6 non-Ducati riders may or may not be able to win a race this season, any of them, given how dominant the GP24 is. But I'd like to go through the top 6 from 6th to 1st, and you each to predict the year in which this rider will next win, or first win in one case, a Grand Prix, not a sprint. So starting at the bottom with Johann Zarco, when, if ever, will Johann Zarco win another Grand Prix? Simon?
Never.
Val?
World Superbikes 2026?
Aleix Espargaro will not win another Grand Prix after this season, but will he get a win in before he leaves? Simon?
Yes.
Val?
Probably not.
Yeah, I think I'm with Val on that one. Wouldn't it be lovely? We've missed the home race to do it. It would be lovely if he'd signed off with the Barcelona Grand Prix win. But moving upwards, Brad Binder, when will he next win a Grand Prix? Simon?
I mean, hopefully any day now, because I think he needs to. But tougher one. 25 maybe at some point if the bike improves a bit.
I've just realised you're asking Grand Prix, so sprints don't count, right? Okay.
Yes. That wouldn't have changed. I don't think that would have changed either of your answers so far.
Yeah, and it won't change this one, 25. Damn.
No.
Fabio Quartararo, when will he next win a Grand Prix, Simon?
Early in 26.
Val?
27.
That's exactly what I would have expected from Bro. I might have expected Simon to sneak like late 25 or something. The wildest of wild cards on the list. When will Maverick Vinales next win a Grand Prix, Simon?
I mean, he could win one tomorrow, and we're not even having one tomorrow. It's Maverick.
Stole my answer. Word for word. That's ridiculous.
I think I'll take that as the answer for both of you. And finally, Pedro Acosta. The question really here is probably, is the win going to come this year still, or has the GP24 got so good that we're talking next year at the earliest? When is he going to win a Grand Prix, Simon?
This year. I think he'll win a rookie. I think he'll win a rookie Grand Prix. Crazy things happen on flyaways, and I think Pedro Acosta likes crazy.
Yeah, fair. Val?
25.
So You can rejoin us here in a week's time to hear what we made of the Aragon Grand Prix. And based on those predictions, you need to rejoin us in mid-2027, where we assess if we were right about all the things we've predicted in this week's episode. We've done very well for not discussing Ducatis, Marquez, rider market at all this week. I suspect next week might be very different. We'll see you then.
The Athletic.